I never thought my life would be defined by headlights cutting through the dark, by the hum of a car engine at midnight, or by the glow of a phone screen telling me where to go next. Yet here I am, confessing to you that the worst mistake I ever made was signing up for night deliveries. It started out simple enough: extra money, flexible hours, the promise that I could work when the rest of the city slept. What I didn't realize was that the night doesn't play by the same rules as the day. The streets look different, the people act different, and sometimes the houses you drive to don't seem like they should exist at all. I was never the type who liked silence. Growing up, my house was chaotic. Siblings arguing, TV blaring, my parents working opposite shifts so that one of them was always moving in or out of the door. Silence was something I craved but never got. When I finally moved into my own small apartment, I realized silence wasn't comforting. It was oppressive. At night, with nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing by outside, I felt swallowed by emptiness. That's what led me to late-night delivery work. The money wasn't spectacular, but it was enough to keep rent paid, gas in the tank, and a little food in the fridge. More than that, it gave me an excuse to drive through the night instead of sitting in my lonely apartment staring at the ceiling. Deliveries gave me motion, and motion gave me purpose. At least, that's what I told myself. Most people don't realize how different the world feels after midnight. You'd think the city just goes quiet, but it doesn't. It changes. The lights flicker differently, casting longer shadows. Streets you've driven down 100 times feel like they stretch further than they should. Every sound, the scrape of a branch against your roof, the hiss of your tires on damp asphalt, feels amplified, like the world is whispering directly to you. I remember my first week clearly. The jobs were routine: fast food, takeout, late-night snacks for students or workers on odd shifts. Most customers looked groggy, grateful, and barely noticed me. But even in those early days, I started noticing the strange ones. One order came from a run-down duplex where the front porch light flickered like a failing heartbeat. When the door opened, no one stood there. Just a hand, pale and trembling, reached out from the darkness and snatched the bag before I could even say hello. Another time, a man in a business suit answered the door at 2:37 a.m., perfectly dressed, hair slicked back, shoes polished like he had just stepped out of a meeting. He gave me a smile too wide, handed me a $5 bill, and shut the door without taking the food. But the worst was the silence between orders. Sitting in my car at a gas station parking lot, staring at the black screen of the delivery app, I'd feel like something was watching me. The empty roads stretched out in every direction, and I often found myself wondering how many people in this city were really awake at this hour. It didn't feel like I was part of a living, breathing place anymore. It felt like I was drifting through someone else's dream. I should have quit after that first week. Something deep inside me knew there was danger here. Not the danger of crime, not the danger of drunk drivers, but something else. A danger older and less forgiving. But I didn't quit. The money, the silence, the feeling of purpose kept pulling me back. And then came the strange requests. Most people ordered normally: burgers, pizza, noodles, the usual. But now and then, an order would come through with notes that didn't make sense. One customer insisted I leave the food on the back porch but warned me not to look at the wind chimes. Another said I had to knock exactly 3 times, no more, no less, or they wouldn't open the door. A third left instructions written in all caps: do not park under the streetlight. Do not speak to anyone who addresses you. Just leave the bag and go. At first, I thought it was a joke. College kids playing pranks, or maybe people bored out of their minds. I even laughed about it. But the first time I disobeyed those rules, just out of curiosity, I learned they weren't jokes. Not at all, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My night shifts always began the same. Around 10 p.m., I'd brew a cup of coffee, grab a hoodie, and step out into the cool air. The city would already be falling asleep, shops closing, traffic thinning, people retreating indoors. By midnight, I'd be one of the few still moving. The delivery app had its own rhythm, too. Orders came in clusters, 3 or 4 back-to-back, then nothing for half an hour. That's when I'd park in the shadow of some gas station canopy, watching the neon signs flicker while moths battered themselves against the buzzing bulbs. The smell of gasoline mixed with damp asphalt would seep into my clothes. Those waiting moments were always the hardest. I'd scroll through my phone sometimes, but the signal at night seemed weaker. Websites loaded slower, videos froze, notifications wouldn't come through. It was as if the world outside my headlights didn't want me connected to anything else. Just me, the car, and the black silence pressing in from every direction. Over time, I began to notice patterns. Certain neighborhoods never showed up on the app during the day, yet at night they were my most frequent destinations. Some houses had no numbers on their mailboxes, no names on the buzzer, but the app guided me straight to them, as if it knew better than I did. And the people. They never seemed quite right. Some looked too tired, like they hadn't slept in years. Others seemed too awake, eyes wide, smiles too fixed, movements too quick. More than once, I thought I saw someone watching me from the shadows of a window long before I reached the door. And when I knocked, the person who answered looked different. Clothes changed. Hair shifted, eyes unfamiliar. One night, I swear I delivered to the same address twice. Once at midnight, once again at 3 a.m., but the houses looked completely different. Same number, same street, same pin on the app, but one house had peeling yellow paint and a sagging roof, while the other was pristine, freshly painted, and glowing with warm light. Both times, someone opened the door and took the bag without a word. That was when I stopped laughing about the rules. I'd hear them whispered sometimes, rules that made no sense. Don't park under the streetlight. Don't step past the welcome mat. Don't hand the food directly to the customer unless they say your name. Don't knock if you hear children laughing inside. Don't make eye contact with mirrors. Don't look at the wind chimes. Don't speak first. Don't stay longer than a minute. The more I drove, the more I realized that night wasn't just darker than the day. It was governed by something else entirely. A different system, one that didn't care if I understood it. All it cared about was obedience. But here's the thing about rules. Eventually, you break one, and that's when everything begins to unravel. The night it truly began was unremarkable at first. Another evening like dozens before it, I remember glancing at the clock, 11:47 p.m. The streets were empty, the kind of emptiness that presses on your chest and makes you wonder if you're the only person left awake in the city. My app buzzed, jolting me from the half-dreamy state I often slipped into during those lulls. An order had come through and I accepted without hesitation. It wasn't until I looked at the address that I felt a twinge of unease. The street name was familiar, Maplewood Drive, but I couldn't remember ever going there at night. The pin dropped in a cluster of houses near the edge of town, not quite rural, but far enough from downtown that the silence was thicker, heavier. The app marked it as a simple order: fried chicken, coleslaw, a soda. Nothing strange about the food, but the delivery notes stopped me cold. They were short, typed in bold capital letters. Knock 3 times. Do not look inside. Wait until the bag is taken before leaving. That was it. Nothing else. I laughed, but the sound was hollow, bouncing off the car windows like it didn't belong to me. I had seen strange notes before, but something about this one felt different. The words weren't playful or quirky. They felt absolute, like commandments. I shook it off, started the engine, and told myself people are weird, especially at night. The drive was uneventful at first. The streets narrowed as I got closer, houses becoming older, their porches sagging, their windows reflecting headlights like dull eyes. The air changed too, cooling, thickening as though I'd crossed an invisible border. By the time I turned onto Maplewood, my chest felt tight, my breath shallow. The house itself stood out. Not because it was run down, but because it looked too clean. Perfect white siding, neat trim, no weeds in the lawn. Yet it had a stillness about it, as if it had been cut from a photograph and pasted onto the street. My headlights illuminated the front porch. A set of wind chimes hung by the door, motionless in the stagnant air. I parked at the curb, gripping the bag like it weighed 100 pounds. My feet felt heavy as I walked up the path. Every step seemed louder than it should have been, like the concrete amplified my movements. When I reached the door, I raised my fist and hesitated. The rules echoed in my head. Knock 3 times. Do not look inside. Wait until the bag is taken before leaving. I knocked once, twice, 3 times. The sound reverberated through the wood. too deep for such a simple door. Then silence. My pulse drummed in my ears. I waited. At first, nothing. Then I heard movement from within. Slow, deliberate footsteps, each one pressing down on a floorboard that groaned in protest. They drew closer, closer still, until they stopped just behind the door. My instinct screamed to lean forward, to peer through the crack of the curtains, but I remembered the note. Do not look inside. The handle turned. Not fully, just enough to make the metal click. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing only darkness beyond. A hand emerged. Pale, slender, veins faintly visible beneath the skin. The fingernails were too clean, almost polished, catching the faint reflection of my headlights. The hand trembled, reaching for the bag. I held it out. The fingers brushed mine, ice cold, clammy, like touching something that had been submerged in water for hours. The hand seized the bag and yanked it inside with startling force. The door slammed shut immediately, the sound shattering the stillness of the night. I froze, staring at the closed door. My instincts rebelled. Something in me needed to look through the window, to confirm what kind of person had just taken that bag. But the rule pressed down on me. Do not look inside, so I didn't. I turned, walked back to my car, and climbed in. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. My breath fogged the windshield, even though the night wasn't cold enough for it. The app pinged. Delivery complete. That simple message felt absurd after what I'd just experienced. I started the car, pulled away from the curb, and didn't look back. But as I drove down the street, I caught sight of something in my rearview mirror. The porch light flickered just once, and the wind chimes swayed violently, though the air was perfectly still. I drove faster. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I finished a few more deliveries, all of them ordinary. Bleary-eyed college kids, late-shift workers, half-asleep parents grabbing snacks for their kids. But that one house on Maplewood stuck in my mind, lodged there like a splinter. It wasn't just the rules. It was the feeling, the certainty that I had stepped into something I didn't understand, that the house wasn't just another address. It was something else, something waiting. When I finally pulled into my apartment parking lot at 3 a.m., I shut off the engine and sat in the silence. My heart still hadn't slowed. The headlights faded, leaving me in darkness. I thought about the hand, the way it had snatched the bag, the icy skin pressing against mine. That night, for the first time, I locked every door, double-checked the windows, and left the lights on as I tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hand again, reaching out from the dark. I told myself it was just one order, just one strange customer. Nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. That was the beginning, the first order, and it would not be the last. The next night, I tried to convince myself it had all been ordinary. Just another strange customer in a city full of them. People leave weird notes, act oddly at the door. Maybe that's just the side effect of living in a world where no one sleeps right anymore. That's what I told myself. But when my app buzzed at 12:09 a.m. with another order from Maplewood Drive, my stomach turned to stone. The food this time was a sandwich, chips, and a bottle of water. Innocent enough. But when I scrolled down to the delivery notes, my throat went dry. Leave the bag on the front step. Do not knock. Do not speak. If you hear someone behind you, do not turn around. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the cancel option. I should have pressed it. I should have logged out, driven home, and thrown my phone into a drawer. But something about those rules pulled me in. They weren't just requests, they were warnings. Warnings wrapped in the kind of certainty that made my skin crawl. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. It's what drove me back to that house. The street was even quieter than before. No porch lights on any of the surrounding homes, no hum of TVs through open windows. Maplewood looked like a place the world had abandoned, leaving behind only facades of houses to trick me into thinking it was still alive. When I pulled up in front of the same perfect white house, the sight of it made my chest ache. The siding gleamed unnaturally, as though it had been scrubbed just moments before my arrival. The lawn looked sharper, edges of grass too defined in my headlights. I got out of the car, holding the bag. My ears rang with silence. Not even insects made noise. I walked the short path to the porch and placed the bag gently on the step. The rules said not to knock, not to speak, so I didn't. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. Footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, dragging across the wooden porch. My body froze, every muscle locked tight. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, to look, to confirm who or what was standing just a few feet away. But the words on the screen burned in my mind. Do not turn around. The footsteps drew closer. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my shoes. My lungs refused to fill, caught between panic and paralysis. The sound stopped right behind me, so close I swear I could feel breath brush the back of my neck. My knees shook. I wanted to run, but the rule was clear. Leave. Don't look. I forced myself to take a step. Another. My legs moved stiffly, like they didn't belong to me. The sound of breathing followed, hovering just inches away. My heart thundered, blood roaring in my ears, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the presence vanished. The air lightened. My chest expanded, finally taking in air. I didn't dare glance back. I ran down the path, stumbled into my car, and slammed the door shut. I sat there, trembling, staring at the house. The porch was empty. The bag was gone. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel until my fingers ached. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of those footsteps again and again. My mind searched for explanations. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone watched the app, waiting to mess with drivers. But the fear felt older, deeper. This wasn't kids playing games. This was something else. Over the following days, I started to notice more rules creeping into my deliveries. One house instructed me to whistle as I approached, but to stop the moment I reached the gate. Another required that I hand the food to a man in a red jacket, even though 3 other people stood silently on the porch. A different order warned me to place the bag in the mailbox and leave before counting to 10. Each time I thought about ignoring the notes, I remembered Maplewood. The footsteps, the breath on my neck, and I obeyed. The strangest part was how natural it began to feel. By the end of the week, following rules became second nature. Park away from streetlights. Don't make eye contact. Leave the bag and go. My job transformed into a ritual, a dance with steps I didn't dare forget. But Maplewood didn't let me go. A week later, the third order arrived. Same house, same perfect siding. This time the notes weren't typed in the app. They were handwritten. When I reached the door, a yellowed envelope sat on the welcome mat, sealed with a smear of wax. I picked it up with shaking fingers, unfolded the brittle paper, and read the rules. Knock exactly 3 times. Do not look inside. Do not speak, no matter what you hear. Wait until the bag is taken. Do not return unless called. I stood there, clutching the note, my pulse pounding. These weren't suggestions. They were commandments, ancient and absolute. I could feel the weight of them pressing against my skin, as though breaking one would invite consequences beyond comprehension. That night, for the first time, I obeyed perfectly. 3 knocks, eyes down, silent, still. The bag vanished into darkness, and I left without hesitation. But the letter came with me. I couldn't help it. I shoved it into my pocket before leaving, as though part of me needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. Back at my apartment, under the harsh glow of my kitchen light, I read it again and again. The ink was faded, written in a hand that looked both hurried and ancient. I don't know why I kept it. Curiosity maybe, or fear. But as the night wore on, I realized something chilling. The letter didn't feel written for me. It felt recycled, passed down, as though countless drivers before me had been given the same list, and I wondered how many of them had broken a rule. I lasted longer than I thought I would. For days after that letter, I followed every instruction to the letter. If a customer asked me to whistle, I whistled. If they told me not to make eye contact, I kept my eyes locked on the ground. If the note said to wait 10 seconds before leaving, I counted in my head, my heart hammering all the while. Fear had reshaped me. I was no longer just a delivery driver. I was a servant to rules I didn't understand. But fear is fragile. It cracks under pressure, under exhaustion, under the weight of routine. And on that night, the night I made my first mistake, I was tired. The order came in around 1:20 a.m., the time when the world feels like it's unraveling. Most nights, the city seemed to quiet after midnight, but that stretch between 1 and 3 a.m. carried a heavier silence. It wasn't sleep, it was absence. Like everything had been erased and I was the last person left. The address was Maplewood again. The same perfect house. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it, but I didn't dare decline. Something inside me told me you don't refuse Maplewood. This time the bag was heavier, steaming containers of soup, bread, a pitcher of something sealed with plastic wrap. The order notes were handwritten again, folded into an envelope taped to the bag. My hands shook as I tore it open. The rules. Knock 3 times. Do not look inside. Do not speak. Wait until the bag is taken. Leave immediately after. I read it 3 times, letting the words burn into my mind. I knew them already. They hadn't changed. And yet, as I walked up the path, I felt the weight of each one pressing against my skin. The night air was damp, cool against my face. The porch loomed closer, the white siding gleaming like bone in my headlights. The wind chimes stirred faintly, though no breeze touched them. I raised my fist. 1 knock, 2, 3. Silence. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing nothing but a black slit. The smell hit me first, damp, heavy, like earth mixed with something sweet and rotting. My stomach turned. The hand emerged again, pale, trembling, hungry. I should have looked away. I should have kept my eyes fixed on the porch railing, on the bag in my hand, on anything but that crack in the door. But exhaustion gnawed at me. Curiosity clawed at me, and for the first time, I broke the rule. I looked inside. At first, my brain refused to make sense of what I saw. The darkness wasn't empty. It was thick, textured, like velvet curtains swaying in an invisible breeze. And behind that veil, shapes shifted. Long, angular, moving too smoothly, too silently. I caught the glint of something wet, the pale oval of a face too thin, too stretched. Eyes reflected faintly, not like human eyes, but like mirrors catching scraps of light. The hand seized the bag and yanked it into the black. But instead of slamming the door, it lingered. The darkness swelled, pressing outward, as though leaning toward me. A whisper bled through the gap. Not words at first, just a sound like dry leaves scraping across pavement. Then, faintly, unmistakably, you looked. The door slammed. I stumbled back, my pulse roaring. My legs barely carried me down the path, and I nearly fell against my car as I scrambled inside. My chest heaved. My vision blurred. I couldn't stop shaking. The app buzzed on my phone. Delivery complete. The cheerfulness of the notification made me want to scream. I drove home too fast, tires screeching on empty streets, every shadow in my rearview mirror stretching too long, too sharp. By the time I reached my apartment, I was drenched in sweat. I slammed the door, locked it, double-locked it, and slid down against it, gasping. I told myself it was just exhaustion, just imagination. I told myself I hadn't really seen anything, just darkness playing tricks. But deep down I knew. I'd broken a rule, and something had noticed. The punishment came the next night. I wasn't even delivering when it happened. I was sitting in my apartment, lights on, trying to distract myself with TV. The sound was low, the flickering glow the only movement in the room. And then faintly I heard it knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks, slow, heavy. The sound came from my window. I froze, every muscle locking. I lived on the 3rd floor. No balcony, no ledge, nothing but a sheer drop to the street below. My phone buzzed with a new order, the screen lighting up with the address. Maplewood. Knock, knock, knock. The curtains stirred. A shadow flickered against them, too tall, too thin. My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my keys, fled the apartment, and drove. My heart didn't slow until I was halfway across town, headlights bouncing across deserted roads. But when I glanced at the app again, the order was still waiting. Maplewood. Always Maplewood. I completed it. I didn't have a choice. When I reached the house, the rules were the same. But this time, the door opened wider than before, just enough for me to see the velvet darkness ripple. just enough for me to hear a faint laugh echoing from within. "You looked," it whispered again. The bag vanished. The door slammed, and I drove away, certain that I had doomed myself. After Maplewood, I stopped pretending I was imagining things. I stopped telling myself I was just tired, or that late-night deliveries blurred reality. I knew something was wrong. I had broken a rule, and now something followed me. But one thought kept me from losing my mind completely. If it had happened to me, maybe it had happened to others. Surely I couldn't be the only driver who noticed the strange orders, the impossible rules. I started looking at people differently. The other delivery cars idling in fast food parking lots. The drivers scrolling through their phones at 2 in the morning. Were they like me? Did they know? It took me weeks to work up the courage to ask. I found the first one at a gas station on the edge of downtown. It was 1:45 a.m., and the place was deserted except for me, a lone clerk half asleep behind the counter, and another driver filling up his tank. His car was plastered with delivery stickers, 3 different apps stacked on top of each other. He looked exhausted with deep shadows under his eyes. I approached casually, trying not to sound insane. "Hey," I said, gesturing to his car. "Long night." He glanced at me, then back at the pump. "Always." I hesitated, then forced the words out. "Ever get weird instructions? Like rules?" The change in his expression was immediate. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened. He studied me carefully as if weighing whether to answer. Then finally he nodded once. "Yeah, I've had them." My chest tightened. "They ever feel dangerous?" His laugh was humorless. "You have no idea." That was the first time I realized it wasn't just me. There were others. Over the next few weeks I began to recognize them, the ones who knew. They lingered longer at pickups, their eyes darting toward shadows, their hands trembling when they scrolled through their apps. They kept their windows rolled up at red lights, even in the summer heat. They never parked under streetlights. We formed a kind of unspoken fraternity. No names, no numbers. Just brief, hushed conversations at gas stations, parking lots, late-night diners where the only sound was the buzz of neon lights. Each of us carried stories, and none of them ended well. One driver told me about an address that didn't exist on maps, a dirt road that led nowhere during the day but to a towering farmhouse at night. He delivered there once, broke a rule, and swore something followed him home. He moved apartments 3 times, but still heard knocking at his windows after midnight. Another described a customer who insisted the bag be left inside a refrigerator sitting on the porch. The fridge door was always wide open, humming faintly though it wasn't plugged in. The rule said, "Leave it. Close the door. Do not wait. Do not listen." He admitted once that he lingered, pressing his ear to the fridge as he shut it. He heard voices whispering his name from inside. A woman with a nervous twitch in her jaw told me she'd delivered to a hospital wing that was supposedly abandoned. The halls were dark, but her app guided her inside, straight to a room where a bed waited with sheets neatly folded. The note said, "Place the food on the bed. Turn off the lights. Leave before you hear footsteps." She claimed she made it out just in time, though she never explained what she saw when the lights flickered out. Each story piled onto the others, stitching together a picture I didn't want to see. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. The rules were everywhere, scattered across cities, tucked into night deliveries like traps. And we drivers were the bait, or the sacrifices. One night at a diner, a man with bloodshot eyes leaned across the booth and whispered something that stuck with me. "The rules aren't to protect them. They're to protect us. If you break them, it notices." I asked him what it was, but he shook his head. "Doesn't matter what you call it. Just don't look. Don't listen. Don't linger." But I already had. Even in that circle of silent survivors, I felt like an outcast. They spoke cautiously, but none admitted to breaking the rules as blatantly as I had. None had confessed to looking inside the house on Maplewood. I didn't tell them either. I couldn't. The way they looked at me when I asked too many questions. It was the same look you'd give someone with a sickness you didn't want to catch. Still, their warnings dug deep into me. They lived with the same fear I did. They knew the roads changed at night. The customers weren't all human, and the rules weren't just eccentricities. They were laws, laws older and more absolute than anything written on paper. After meeting them, I started noticing more. Noticing the way the app sometimes guided me in circles, as if testing whether I'd obey. Noticing the way certain streets looked different depending on the time of night. Noticing how some houses seemed to breathe, their curtains shifting though no air stirred. And I noticed something else too. Disappearances. Drivers who had been part of our unspoken fraternity simply stopped showing up. No one mentioned them. No one dared to. But I remembered their faces, their tired voices, their whispered warnings. I never saw them again. It was in those moments, sitting in my car at 3 a.m., with another impossible rule staring at me from my phone, that I realized the truth. We weren't drivers anymore. We were players in a game we didn't understand, a game where the rules weren't optional, a game where breaking them meant punishment, and I had already broken one. The others kept their distance after that. I could see it in their eyes, the subtle shift when I walked into the diner or pulled up to the gas station. They sensed it on me, that I was marked, that I had crossed a line you weren't supposed to cross. They were right. Because while they spoke of being haunted, of being followed, of strange whispers in the dark, none of them described what I experienced next. None of them talked about the thing that waited for me outside my apartment window, knocking 3 times when the world was silent. I was already beyond their warnings. The strange thing about fear is how it reshapes your world. At first, my territory had felt manageable. Clusters of city streets, familiar fast food chains, the occasional late-night apartment complex. I could map it in my head, feel the limits of where I drove each night. But slowly, almost without me realizing it, those boundaries began to stretch. The orders started pulling me farther out, dragging me into places I didn't recognize, into neighborhoods that didn't feel like part of the city at all. It started subtly. A few streets beyond my usual routes, a delivery across town instead of down the block. The app would buzz with a pickup, and the address would be somewhere I had to squint at, a name I'd never heard despite living here my whole life. The pins on the map glowed faintly, almost insistently, like they were drawing me in. The first of these was a farmhouse on the edge of a county road. The drive was longer than I liked, 40 minutes of silence, headlights bouncing off trees and empty fields. By the time I reached the gravel driveway, my knuckles ached from gripping the wheel. The instructions were simple. Leave the bag on the porch. Do not wait. Do not look inside. The house was dark, every window shuttered. The porch groaned under my weight as I placed the bag down. But before I turned to leave, I noticed something scratched into the wood near my feet. Numbers. 7 sets of them, carved deep into the boards. Phone numbers maybe, but when I looked closer, some of the digits didn't make sense. Symbols I didn't recognize. I left quickly, heart hammering. Gravel crunching beneath my tires as I sped back toward the city. But that was only the beginning. Within days, I was being sent deeper, roads with no streetlights, cul-de-sacs I'd never heard of, alleys where the buildings leaned too close together, suffocating the air. The deliveries became stranger too. Houses with no cars in the driveway, no lights in the windows, yet the door always opened the moment I knocked. Apartments that smelled of mildew and salt water, even though the ocean was miles away. Barns with hay stacked high, though no animals stirred inside. Each place had its own rules. At one house, the instructions were, do not use the front steps. Climb through the side fence. Do not let your shadow touch the door. Another said, whistle as you approach. If you hear whistling back, leave immediately. At first, I thought maybe it was just my city. Maybe this place was cursed in some way. Maybe these rules belonged only here. But one night I met another driver at a gas station, someone from out of state passing through. He told me he'd seen the same thing in his city. Different streets, different houses, but the same impossible rules. He said it was spreading. The thought made me sick. By the 3rd week, I noticed the app itself had changed. My delivery zone no longer looked like a neat map of the city. The boundaries bled outward, smudged gray areas creeping further each night. Roads appeared on the screen that didn't exist during the day. Pins dropped on stretches of forest or in the middle of empty fields. Yet when I followed them at night, the roads were there, waiting. The worst was the cabin in the woods. The address led me down a narrow dirt path, trees crowding in on both sides, branches clawing at my car. My headlights seemed swallowed by the darkness, showing me only a few feet ahead at a time. Finally, the path widened into a clearing. The cabin stood in the center, hunched and crooked, smoke curling from a chimney that shouldn't have been working. The note was short. Do not knock. Leave the food on the stump. Do not look at the windows. I did as told, placing the bag on a moss-covered stump by the porch. But as I turned to go, my eyes betrayed me. They flicked toward the cabin's dark windows just for an instant. And in that instant I saw faces, dozens of them, pressed against the glass, pale and gaunt, mouths open in silent screams. I tore myself away, sprinted to the car, and drove until the trees gave way to city lights. Even then, I felt those faces burned into my vision, watching from every reflective surface. The territory stretched further with each passing night. Old warehouses, abandoned schools, isolated gas stations where the pumps still worked, though the buildings were boarded up. Each location had its rules, each more bizarre than the last. One school required me to leave the food in a locker marked 13. Another gas station instructed me to honk twice before stepping out of the car. At a warehouse, the rules demanded I enter through the loading dock, walk exactly 12 steps, and leave the bag on a marked pallet. The deeper I went, the less the world felt real. Streets didn't match maps anymore. Sometimes I'd drive a straight road for miles, only to find myself looping back to where I'd started. Time bent too. A 10-minute drive would swallow an hour. Once I swore I saw dawn on the horizon, only to blink and find midnight again. The farther I went, the more I realized the city I thought I knew was just a shell. Beneath it, or maybe layered on top of it, was something else. A network of places and rules that only revealed themselves at night, and the app knew them all. It guided me without hesitation, as though it had always been programmed for this. The pins dropped on streets that shouldn't exist, yet when I followed, the road was there, waiting like it had been expecting me. The voice inside me whispered that I wasn't just delivering food anymore. I was delivering myself piece by piece into its hands. I stopped talking to the other drivers. What good would it do? Their stories only mirrored mine, and mine were getting worse. I was going farther, seeing things they hadn't. Maybe because I had already broken a rule. Maybe because Maplewood had marked me. Whatever the reason, I knew this much. My territory was no longer just my city. It was expanding, pulling me into places I didn't recognize, places that weren't meant for people like me. And each delivery carried me deeper, like a hook tugging a fish into black water. And still, I couldn't stop, because when the app buzzed, I answered, and the rules were waiting. The deeper I went, the harder it became to keep every instruction straight. Each house, each cabin, each impossible delivery came with its own commandments. At first, I followed them with terrified precision, but rules have a way of piling up, and fear has a way of dulling when you live in it too long. My hands grew shaky, my thoughts scattered, and exhaustion ate away at my judgment. That's how mistakes began to happen. The first was small. A house on the outskirts of town gave me the usual set of instructions. Leave the food on the porch. Knock once. Do not wait for a response, simple enough. But as I placed the bag down, I thought I heard a voice. A child's giggle, faint, drifting from behind the door. My instincts rebelled, telling me to run, but curiosity rooted me in place. I lingered 3 seconds longer than I should have, staring at the wood grain of the door. And then something knocked back. From the inside, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Slow, deliberate. I bolted, sprinting for my car, fumbling the keys, nearly dropping them as my hands trembled. I slammed the door shut, just as something heavy thudded against the porch, shaking the wood. I drove until the houses blurred, my chest aching, my breath ragged. The second mistake was worse. The address was a crumbling duplex where the streetlights buzzed faintly, swarming with moths. The rules said, deliver to apartment 3B, do not take the elevator. Do not acknowledge anyone you meet in the hallway. The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed. The air smelled like mildew and copper. Halfway up, I saw her, a woman in a hospital gown standing barefoot on the landing. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her lips pressed tight together. I froze. My heart hammered, but I forced myself to keep walking. I didn't speak, didn't look directly at her. But as I passed, she whispered my name. I don't know how she knew it. I broke. I turned my head, just for an instant. Her mouth stretched into a grin too wide, teeth too many, eyes too black. The smile followed me all the way to 3B, where I left the bag with shaking hands and fled. That night, I dreamed of her standing at the foot of my bed, whispering my name again and again until I woke with sweat soaking my sheets. But the third mistake nearly killed me. The order led me to a stretch of highway I had never driven. The instructions were printed clearly. Do not stop driving. Deliver through the passenger side window. Do not look at the road signs. It was absurd, but by then I no longer questioned absurdity. The night was quiet, the road endless, the dark pressing on all sides. As I approached the pin on the map, a figure stood by the roadside, holding out pale hands. I slowed, rolling the window down, pushing the bag into the darkness. The figure took it silently, but then I made the fatal error. I looked up. I glanced at a road sign just for a second. The letters weren't letters. They twisted and writhed, forming shapes that hurt my eyes. My head pounded, vision blurring as if the sign itself was crawling into me. My hand slipped on the wheel, the car swerved, tires screeching on asphalt. For a moment the world tilted, and I felt myself teetering on the edge of something not meant for me. Somehow I didn't crash. Somehow I made it back, but that night when I shut my eyes I saw the sign again. The shapes, the impossible script etching itself into the inside of my eyelids. After that, I stopped counting mistakes. They came too often. A glance at the wrong time, a hesitation at the wrong door, a breath held too short or too long. Each error was small, but each one left marks. My reflection in mirrors began to lag, eyes blinking a second too late. My phone battery drained faster, as though something else was feeding on it. My dreams became indistinguishable from waking. I started to hear whispers in my car, especially when I passed through unfamiliar streets. They came from the back seat, from the vents, from the faint static of the radio even when it was off. Sometimes the whispers said nothing but noise, rustling like leaves. Other times they said things I didn't want to hear. You shouldn't have looked. You broke the rules. You belong to us now. Sleep offered no escape. When I closed my eyes, I relived every mistake, but twisted. Houses taller than they should be, porches stretching into infinity, customers with faces melting into blank flesh. My apartment felt less like home and more like a waiting room, a fragile bubble that could burst any second. The more rules I broke, the more the punishments blurred together. Once, after lingering too long at a doorstep, I returned to my car to find the back seat damp, as though someone had been sitting there, dripping water onto the fabric. Another time, after accidentally speaking to a figure in a hallway, my phone screen lit up with a message that wasn't from the app. Stop, and yet, I couldn't stop. Every time the app buzzed, I felt compelled to answer. Not because I needed the money anymore, no amount of cash was worth this, but because I felt owned, marked. Like refusing an order would be worse than following it, no matter the cost. The other drivers had warned me, and I hadn't listened. They told me the rules weren't just for the customers, they were for us. And now I understood. Every broken rule chipped away at whatever thin protection I had left. The city was no longer mine. It belonged to the rules, to the thing that enforced them, and I was just a delivery driver, too tired, too foolish, too desperate to resist. But the worst part wasn't the mistakes themselves. It was the feeling that the rules were changing, adapting to me. They knew I was weak. They knew I was slipping, and each new order felt like a test I wasn't meant to pass. And deep down, I knew that sooner or later, one mistake would be my last. By the time the 8th week of this cursed routine rolled around, I had almost grown numb to the strangeness. The rules, the whispers, the punishments, they became the background hum of my life. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I thought I had seen the worst of it. I was wrong. It began with a name I recognized. The app buzzed at 11:56 p.m., flashing an order with a delivery pinned to a neighborhood near the old industrial district. The food was ordinary, 2 burgers, fries, and a drink, but the customer's name stopped me cold, Peter Brozowitz. It wasn't just a random name. I knew Peter, not well, but enough. He had been a customer before, one of the rare ones who actually smiled when he opened the door, who said thank you, like he meant it. I remembered his cluttered apartment, his worn recliner visible behind him, the faint sound of some late-night sitcom playing in the background. He was human in a sea of inhuman encounters. So when I saw his name again, I felt a strange relief. Maybe this delivery would be normal. Maybe Peter would be standing there in his robe, chuckling at some joke on TV, grateful for his food. Maybe I could pretend just for a moment that things hadn't spiraled completely out of control. The address matched what I remembered, 42 Birch Lane, 2nd floor. I drove there quickly, almost eagerly. The streets were empty, the streetlights flickering, but my chest felt lighter. When I arrived, the building was the same one I recalled. Brick exterior, narrow stairs, peeling paint on the railing. I climbed the steps with the bag in hand, already imagining Peter's relief at a hot meal. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again. The sound echoed strangely as though the hallway were longer than it should be, stretching into darkness. Still no answer. Finally, the door creaked open a few inches. I leaned forward, expecting Peter's familiar face. But the apartment was dark. Too dark, Peter, I whispered before I could stop myself. No answer. The bag felt heavier in my hands. Against my better judgment, I pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The apartment was empty, not just empty of people. Empty of everything. The recliner, the TV, the clutter. It was all gone. The walls were bare, the floorboards exposed, dust coating every surface. The air smelled stale, like no one had lived there for decades. I staggered back, heart racing. No, this isn't right, my phone buzzed. I looked down. The app flashed a message, delivery complete, but I hadn't delivered anything. The bag was still in my hands, and then I noticed it. The dust on the floor, there were footprints, leading from the door, across the apartment, into the darkness of the back room. Fresh footprints, pressed deep into the dust, as though someone had just walked there moments before. My stomach turned. I wanted to leave, to run, but some part of me needed to know. Needed to confirm. I followed the footprints. The back room was colder, the air heavy. The footprints stopped in the middle of the floor. No furniture, no belongings, nothing. Just the prints ending abruptly, like the person had vanished into thin air. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Thank you. I dropped the bag and bolted. The stairwell seemed longer on the way down, the steps creaking under my frantic pace. By the time I burst out onto the street, my chest was heaving, sweat slick on my skin. I turned back, half expecting to see someone watching from the window, but the apartment was dark, silent, lifeless. The next day, I returned. Not at night, during daylight, when the sun washed the city in normalcy. I needed to prove to myself that it had all been some trick of exhaustion. I found the building easily enough. Same brick walls, same peeling railing. But when I climbed the stairs to Peter's apartment, the door was boarded shut. Weathered wood planks crossed the frame, nails rusted deep into the walls. Confused, I asked the landlord, an older man sweeping the sidewalk below. That place? He said, frowning. Ain't nobody lived there in years. Not since, hell, maybe 15 years ago. My mouth went dry. What about Peter Brozowitz? The landlord shook his head slowly. Never heard of him. I left quickly, the weight of his words crushing me. That night, the app buzzed again. A new order. Different food, different location. But when I checked the customer's name, my blood turned to ice. Peter Brozowitz. And again, the delivery completed itself without explanation. From that night on, I began noticing the pattern. Customers I thought I knew, people I'd seen and spoken to, started disappearing. Their names kept showing up on the app, but their homes were abandoned, their apartments gutted, their addresses non-existent on any map. And yet the app insisted the deliveries were real, marking each one complete, thanking me with cheerful pings. It was as if the customers weren't disappearing at all. It was as if they had been erased, their existence consumed by whatever force dictated the rules. I stopped asking questions. Who could I ask? The other drivers? They already avoided me. The police? They'd laugh me out of the station. Friends? Family? I had none close enough to believe me. But I couldn't ignore the truth. Every time a customer vanished, every time their name appeared on the app again, I felt something shifting inside me. A pressure, a weight, like their absence was filling me up, drop by drop, night after night. The worst part was the realization that maybe one day, my name would be next. That someday another driver would see me in their app. That they'd arrive at my address, only to find my apartment empty, my belongings gone, my existence erased, and the app would still ping cheerfully, delivery complete. I used to trust the app more than anything else. It was my compass, my lifeline. When the world outside turned hostile, and the streets no longer looked like they belonged to the city I knew, the app at least gave me direction. Pins dropped on maps, arrows guided me down streets, cheerful notifications reassured me that I was still doing my job. But then the glitches began. At first, they were small. The kind of errors you'd expect from overworked servers or poor cell reception. The screen freezing for a second, the GPS marker lagging behind, addresses loading late, nothing I couldn't explain, but the glitches grew bolder. One night I accepted an order from a burger joint. The app told me to drive east, but the arrow on the map began spinning, pointing in circles, like it couldn't decide which way was real. I pulled over, refreshing the screen, but the spinning didn't stop. Finally, the arrow settled, pointing not east, not west, but straight down. Into the ground. I laughed nervously, told myself it was a bug. But when I glanced up, the road ahead of me had shifted. The lines painted on the asphalt bent slightly, curving in ways they shouldn't. The second glitch happened 2 nights later. The order looked normal at first. Chinese food, a house near the river. But when I zoomed in on the address, the map blurred. The streets melted together, lines bending and twisting, names unreadable. I blinked, and for a second, I thought I saw something moving beneath the map, shapes writhing, like worms beneath skin. Then the image snapped back to normal, and the pin blinked insistently at me. I delivered anyway. The house was there, waiting. But the worst came when the app started giving me addresses that didn't exist. It began subtly, guiding me to houses I'd never seen before. During the day, when I checked, those streets ended in empty lots or dead ends. Yet at night, the houses appeared, whole, solid, waiting for me with rules taped to their doors. One evening, I received an order from Laurel Street. I knew my city inside out by then, and there was no Laurel Street. But the app insisted, the pin glowing brighter than usual. Against my better judgment, I followed. The road unfurled before me, dark and narrow, lined with skeletal trees. At the end of it stood a tall house with narrow windows, its roof leaning at impossible angles. The instructions read, "Leave the food at the door." "Do not speak to the man in the window." I delivered. I obeyed. But when I drove past the next day, the road was gone. No trace of Laurel Street remained. After that, the app began to feel less like a tool and more like a trap. It wasn't just glitching. It was guiding me to places that weren't part of the city at all. Places that seemed to exist only for me, only at night. One night, the glitch took a darker turn. The order came in at 2:12 a.m., late even for me. The restaurant was one I didn't recognize, its name scrambled with symbols instead of letters. The order details were garbled nonsense, strings of characters that didn't belong to any language I knew. Yet the app still gave me an address. Coordinates, not a street name. I hesitated, finger hovering over cancel. But the thought of what might happen if I refused tightened in my chest. The memory of knocks at my third-floor window, of whispers in my car, of rules broken and punishments delivered. I accepted. The route stretched longer than any I had driven before. Highways bled into empty roads, then into dirt paths. My GPS marker trembled, jumping erratically, but always dragging me forward. The world outside my headlights seemed to blur. Trees bending into shapes that didn't belong to nature. Finally, the app declared I had arrived. There was nothing there, just an open field, damp with fog, grass swaying gently in the night breeze. No house, no cabin, no structure at all. My phone buzzed. A new message appeared. Place the bag. Wait. Do not leave until told. My mouth went dry. I set the bag down in the wet grass, my shoes soaking instantly. The air smelled heavy, metallic. I stood there, waiting. my breath visible in the cold. Minutes passed. The fog thickened, curling around my ankles, rising to my knees. Shapes flickered at the edge of my vision, shifting in the mist. I tried not to look, not to breathe too loudly. Then my phone buzzed again. Delivery complete. The bag was gone. I ran to the car, slamming the door, engine roaring as I peeled away from the field. My heart didn't settle for hours, not until I was back in the city with the glow of streetlights pressing down on me. But even then, the app followed me. Notifications popped up at random. Blank orders, no food listed, no addresses. Just empty screens that buzzed insistently before vanishing. Sometimes the orders came with fragments of rules. Do not, followed by static, or never speak before cutting off. One night I woke to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I hadn't logged into the app. I hadn't even left it open. But when I picked it up, a delivery was waiting. The customer's name, me, the address, my apartment. I dropped the phone like it burned me. When I picked it up again, the screen was blank. No order, no history, nothing, but the fear never left. From then on, I stopped trusting the app. But I couldn't stop using it either. Every buzz felt like a command, every pin a hook dragging me deeper. And the glitches only grew worse, more frequent, more personal. It wasn't a glitch anymore. It was control, and I was losing whatever thin grasp of my own choices I had left. It was the order that almost ended me, the one the other drivers whispered about, but never dared to accept. The one that came with coordinates instead of a street name. I still remember the time, 12:37 a.m. The streets were deserted, rain misting against my windshield, the city half asleep. My phone buzzed with the familiar chime, but this time there was no restaurant name, no food listed, no cheerful icons. Just a set of numbers glowing against the screen. Coordinates. For a long moment I sat in silence, staring at them. My gut told me to cancel, to log out, to throw my phone into the glove compartment and drive home. But I didn't. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was the pull of something stronger. Maybe it was the knowledge that if I refused, the rules would come for me anyway. So I pressed accept. The app guided me past the edges of the city, into rural stretches of highway I didn't recognize. Streetlights gave way to darkness, buildings thinned to patches of forest and abandoned barns. My GPS marker trembled with each mile, but the arrow never faltered. Always forward, always deeper. The road narrowed into a cracked two-lane strip, trees arching over like a tunnel. My headlights carved weak paths through the fog, illuminating only a few feet ahead. With each turn, I felt the world thinning, like I was peeling away from reality one layer at a time. Finally, the app chimed. I had arrived, but there was no house, no cabin, no apartment building, just an endless stretch of dirt road leading to a sagging wooden gate, half rotted, leaning under the weight of vines. Beyond it was nothing but darkness, a thick velvet black that swallowed the beam of my headlights. I almost turned around. Almost. But then my phone buzzed. A new notification appeared. Rules for delivery. Do not stop driving once you pass the gate. Do not answer your phone. Do not look behind you. Do not stop until the customer takes the order. My hands trembled around the wheel. I wanted to scream, to refuse, to abandon everything, but instead I pressed the gas. The gate creaked as I nudged it open with the bumper. It groaned like it hadn't been touched in years. I eased the car forward, and the world beyond shifted. The road stretched endlessly, packed dirt illuminated in sickly shades of gray by my headlights. Trees loomed on either side, their branches twisting into claws, scraping against the roof of my car as I drove. The air grew colder, sharper, as though I was sinking into a place where breath didn't belong. Minutes passed, then longer. My phone buzzed once in the passenger seat. Instinctively, I reached for it, then froze. Rule 2, do not answer your phone. The buzzing grew louder, more insistent, like the phone was vibrating directly against my bones. I forced my eyes forward, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached, and then came the laughter. It started faint, behind me, from the back seat. A child's laugh, high-pitched, playful. My heart lurched. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I fought the urge to glance in the rearview mirror. Rule 3. Do not look behind you. The laughter grew louder, joined by whispers. Words I couldn't understand, syllables curling like smoke, wrapping around my ears. The rearview mirror trembled, as though someone were breathing fog against the glass. I pressed harder on the gas. The trees blurred into streaks, the road stretching into infinity. My phone buzzed again, then again, until the sound became constant, a vibrating scream against the dashboard. I wanted to throw it out the window, but fear rooted me to the seat. Then up ahead I saw it. A figure stood in the road, pale and motionless, arms outstretched. My headlights caught a face too smooth, features blurred like melted wax. In its hands was a paper bag. I slowed, heart hammering, and rolled the window down just enough to slide my own delivery bag through. The figure reached forward. Its fingers were long, jointed too many times, curling delicately as they grasped the bag. The moment it touched the food, the phone stopped buzzing. The whispers silenced. The laughter ceased. The figure stepped back, melting into the darkness as though it had never been there. My phone pinged with one last cheerful message. Delivery complete. I slammed my foot down on the gas, speeding past the figure, past the gate, until I burst back onto the cracked two-lane road. The night air shifted instantly. The fog thinned. The trees looked normal again. My phone screen returned to its usual glow, cheerful and harmless. But I wasn't the same. I knew, with bone-deep certainty, that I had driven somewhere I wasn't supposed to go. That the forbidden address wasn't just a glitch, wasn't just a mistake in the app. It was a place that existed outside of everything I understood, waiting for people like me. And I had obeyed. That night, when I finally made it back to my apartment, I didn't bother to lock the door. What good would it do? I collapsed onto the couch, staring at my phone, half expecting another order to come through immediately. But the screen stayed dark. For the first time, I realized that the rules weren't just strange commands from strange customers. They were barriers. Thin lines drawn to keep something contained. And every time I broke them, every time I strayed too far, the lines blurred a little more. The forbidden address had shown me the truth. This wasn't about food anymore. It wasn't about customers or money or late-night deliveries. It was about rules, about obedience, about survival in a game where I had no power. And the worst part? I knew the app would send me back. It was only a matter of time. I should have quit long before that night. I should have thrown my phone into the river, driven until the roads ran out, and never looked back. But by then, quitting wasn't an option. The app owned me. The rules owned me. The final delivery didn't come with warning. No whispers in the dark, no strange premonitions. It appeared on my phone like any other, buzzing at 12:01 a.m., glowing on the cracked screen as I sat in my car outside a shuttered gas station. The order was simple. Fried chicken, a soda, nothing unusual. But the address. The address wasn't Maplewood, or some boarded-up apartment, or even coordinates. It was something worse, unknown. The app had never done that before. Just a single word flashing where the address should be. But the accept button still glowed, pulsing like a heartbeat. My finger trembled as I tapped it. The map opened. No streets, no pins. Just a black screen with a single arrow pointing forward. I put the car in gear and drove. The city blurred past, then vanished. Highways gave way to empty fields, fields gave way to forests, and forests gave way to something else entirely. The road stretched impossibly, bending into angles that made no sense. The horizon curving where it shouldn't. My headlights barely reached the asphalt, swallowed by shadows pressing too close. After what felt like hours, the app chimed. You have arrived. There was no house, no cabin, no barn. Just a road that ended in front of a structure that made my blood run cold. It was a house, but not like any I'd seen. Its walls pulsed faintly as though breathing. Its windows gaped like empty sockets, blackness spilling from them in heavy curtains. The door was crooked, swollen like a mouth, wood wet with something darker than water. The entire building leaned toward me, hungry, expectant. My phone buzzed with the rules. Rules for delivery, 1 knock, 3 times, do not speak, do. Not look away until the bag is taken. Do not refuse. Entry if invited inside. Leave only when the door closes. The words burned into my eyes, too sharp, too final. I wanted to throw the bag into the dirt and flee, but my body moved without my permission. The weight of every broken rule, every mistake, every whispered punishment pressed down on me, dragging me toward the porch. The steps groaned like bones snapping beneath my feet. The door loomed closer, its surface slick, reflecting faint glimmers of my headlights. I raised my hand and knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed too long, rolling into the distance like thunder. The door creaked open. I expected the pale hand, the velvet darkness, the whispers. But this time, something else waited. A face, not a customer, not a shadow. A face I knew, my own. It stared at me from the gap, eyes wide, lips pale, skin trembling as though stretched too thin. I couldn't breathe. My reflection stood inside that house, clutching its own bag of food, mirroring my every movement. The rules screamed in my head. Do not speak. Do not look away. So I didn't. I stared as the bag in its hand dissolved, melting into the shadows behind it. Slowly it reached out, fingers trembling, brushing mine as it took my delivery. The cold burned my skin, sinking deep into my bones. The door creaked wider. My reflection stepped closer, lips twitching as though forming words. The rules shifted in my mind, twisting, warping. Do not refuse entry if invited inside, and then it spoke. My voice but hollow. Come in. Every instinct screamed to run. But the rules pressed down like chains, tightening around my chest. My foot lifted, stepping forward against my will. The air inside the doorway was thick, damp, tasting of rot and iron. I crossed the threshold. Darkness swallowed me whole. The house closed around me, its walls breathing, its floors groaning beneath each step. My reflection led me deeper, its movements jerky, too precise, like a puppet pulled by strings. Shadows clung to the walls, shapes shifting in the corners of my eyes. Faces, limbs, things with too many joints bending in silence. The deeper we went, the more the world outside vanished. My phone screen flickered, notifications flashing faster than I could read. Delivery complete. Delivery complete. Delivery complete. Over and over, endless, as though the app itself was mocking me. Finally, we reached a room. It wasn't a room in any normal sense. The walls curved inward, slick and wet, pulsing like the inside of a throat. In the center stood a table, and on the table lay dozens of delivery bags. Some old, stained with mold. Others new, their receipts still crisp. My reflection placed my bag among them. Then it turned to me. You broke the rules, it whispered, voice splitting in layers. Mine and not mine. Now you are the delivery, the walls shuddered. The table groaned. The bags split open one by one, spilling not food but pieces, watches, wallets, keys, bones. I stumbled back, choking on the stench of decay. My reflection smiled, lips cracking, blood seeping down its chin. There are no customers, it said. There are only rules. The shadows surged forward, wrapping around my arms, my legs, pulling me toward the table. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed instantly, devoured by the house itself. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was my reflection leaning close, whispering into my ear, delivery complete. When I stumbled out of that house, I wasn't the same. I don't even know if I left it at all. Sometimes I wonder if I've been inside ever since, and everything after is just some cruel trick it's playing on me. But I remember the air hitting my lungs like knives, the headlights of my car burning my eyes, the wet taste of freedom on my tongue. I remember collapsing into the driver's seat, shaking so violently I could barely turn the key. I should have gone home. I should have smashed my phone and buried it in the dirt, but when the screen lit up again, I couldn't look away. The order came at 3:03 a.m. No restaurant, no food listed, just an address I recognized instantly, my own apartment. For a long time I stared, unable to breathe. My reflection's voice still echoed in my skull. You are the delivery. My body moved before my mind caught up. I drove back into the city, through streets that looked thinner, hollower, as if stripped bare. When I pulled into the cracked lot outside my building, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rules appeared. Knock on your own door 3 times. 2. Do not speak. 3. Do not open the door yourself. 4. Wait until the customer answers. My legs shook as I climbed the stairs. Every step groaned, every shadow felt alive. At the top, I stared at my own apartment door, the one I had locked and double-locked every night for months. My hand rose, wooden, unwilling, and knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence. Then the sound of movement inside. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching from within. My throat closed. The door opened. And standing there was a man I had never seen before. Tall, thin, with gray hair slicked back, dressed in a black coat. But the moment his eyes met mine, my stomach dropped. He knew me. I could see it in his gaze, heavy with recognition. "Finally," he said. His voice was calm, deep, and certain. "You've been a long time coming." I tried to step back, but my feet refused. "You've broken more rules than most," he continued. "And yet you're still here. That means you're ready." He gestured inside my own apartment. "Come in. We have much to discuss." The rules didn't say I could refuse. My chest tightened as I stepped across the threshold. The apartment wasn't mine anymore. The furniture was gone, the walls stripped bare, the floor lined with dozens of delivery bags stacked in neat rows. Each bore a name scrawled across the receipt. Some I recognized. Most I didn't. The man closed the door gently. "Do you understand what this is?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "This isn't about food," he said. "It never was. It's about obedience. The rules exist to separate the survivors from the sacrifices. You've been tested again and again, and you've failed. But that's why you're here. That's why I know your name." He stepped closer, his eyes burning into me. "You belong to the system now. You're not a driver. You're not a customer. You're something in between, and that's why you're useful." My phone buzzed. I looked down. A new set of rules appeared, written differently than before. Cleaner, sharper, like they'd been etched into the screen itself. Do not resist the orders. 2. Do not question the rules. 3. Deliver yourself when called. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to demand answers. But when I looked up, the man was smiling faintly, as though he could hear every thought in my head. "You've already seen the truth," he said softly. "The houses that vanish, the customers who disappear, the app that guides you where no roads exist. You've seen the forbidden address, and yet you return. You always return. That's what makes you ours." He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was cold, heavy, anchoring me in place. "Your deliveries aren't for strangers anymore," he whispered. "They're for you. Every bag you've carried, every order you've completed has been shaping you, preparing you. And now it's time." The room shuddered. The delivery bags rustled, receipts fluttering though no wind stirred. My phone buzzed again, brighter, louder, until the sound filled my skull. New order received, the address, unknown. The customer, me. I dropped the phone, but the buzzing continued, vibrating through the floor, rattling the walls. The man's smile widened, splitting too far, teeth too sharp. "Go on," he said. "It's waiting." My legs moved without command. I stumbled toward the door, my reflection flickering in the metal knob, eyes too dark, grin too wide. Behind me, the man's voice followed. "You were chosen the moment you broke the first rule, and every mistake since has only bound you tighter. There is no escape. There is only delivery." I stepped into the hallway. The walls stretched, the stairs spiraled endlessly downward, and outside, the world was gone. No city, no streets, no cars. Only a vast black plain with a single pin of light glowing in the distance. My phone buzzed one last time in my pocket. Delivery in progress. And I knew then that the customer wasn't Peter or Maplewood or any of the shadows waiting in those impossible houses. The customer was me. It had always been me. The system had been reshaping me night after night until I no longer belonged to the living world. Until I was nothing more than another part of its endless cycle. And as I walked into the darkness, guided by that glowing pin, I realized the truth. I wasn't delivering food anymore. I was delivering myself. I used to think the rules were there to keep me safe, that if I followed them carefully, if I obeyed without hesitation, I could slip through the night unscathed. But after the customer who knew me, after the truth seeped into my bones, I realized the rules weren't barriers at all. They were threads, fragile strings keeping the world stitched together. And I had broken too many. The unraveling began slowly. It was subtle at first. Streets I'd driven hundreds of times stretched a little longer than they should. Buildings flickered between old and new, graffiti disappearing and reappearing in the blink of an eye. Sometimes I'd pass a gas station twice on the same road, the same clerk behind the counter, the same moth battering itself against the neon light. Then the days began to blur. I'd wake up unsure if the sun was rising or setting. My phone's clock shifted hours at random, skipping from 11 p.m. to 3:17 a.m. in the space of a single breath. I delivered to houses in broad daylight, only to blink and find myself driving under a black sky with no stars. Time had become elastic, bending, snapping back, coiling around me like a snake. The collapse worsened when the customers themselves changed. At first, they were still human enough, faces pale, smiles strained, eyes too wide. But then they began to fracture. A woman opened the door and her face split into three, each expression lagging a second behind the other. A man accepted his food with arms that bent in too many places, elbows where there shouldn't be joints. Once a child peeked from behind a curtain, but its eyes weren't eyes at all. They were mirrors, and I saw myself staring back, older, gaunter, already half consumed. I told myself I was hallucinating, sleep-deprived, losing my mind. But the world refused to give me comfort. One night I drove past my own apartment building. Except it wasn't mine. The bricks were the wrong color, the windows boarded, the stairwell twisted sideways like a broken spine. Yet when I glanced at my phone, the app chirped, "Delivery complete." Another night, I received an order to a diner I'd been to dozens of times. But when I arrived, the neon sign was upside down, the letters dripping like wet paint. Inside, the booths were filled with faceless figures chewing noiselessly, their heads twitching in unison. I left the bag on the counter and fled before the cook turned around, because I knew if I saw his face, it would be my own. Reality had stopped holding itself together. The roads looped endlessly. I'd drive for hours, convinced I was escaping, only to arrive at the same intersection, the same stop sign, the same broken billboard advertising a restaurant that had closed years ago. The city no longer obeyed its own map. It was folding in on itself, stitching streets together in ways that defied logic, and the rules no longer made sense either. One order instructed me to knock 3 times, but do not knock. Another told me to leave the bag inside, but do not enter. Once, a note simply read, "You already know." I tried to resist. I tried to tell myself none of it was real. But every time I hesitated, every time I broke a rule even slightly, the punishments grew worse. The whispers followed me constantly now. They no longer hid in the back seat or the vents. They filled the air around me, thick and suffocating. Sometimes they spoke in languages I didn't know, voices layered on top of one another like static. Other times they spoke directly to me. "You belong to us. You've already delivered. You are the order." My reflection stopped obeying me. In mirrors, in windows, in puddles on the street, it moved a fraction slower, its smile too sharp, its eyes too knowing. Once I watched it raise a hand when mine stayed still. Another time it mouthed words I couldn't hear, but I knew the shape of them. Delivery complete. I began to lose track of myself. Was I still a driver? Or had I become one of the customers waiting behind a door for something I couldn't name? I'd lie awake in my apartment and swear I heard footsteps in the hall stopping outside my door. Sometimes they knocked, sometimes they didn't need to. The collapse reached its peak one night when the app sent me nowhere. Literally nowhere. The screen displayed a blank void, no streets, no pins, just blackness. Yet the arrow insisted I drive forward, so I did. The road beneath me dissolved into mist, the world around me peeling away until only darkness remained. For hours, maybe days, I drove through nothing. No landmarks, no signs, no sound except the engine humming and my heart pounding. My headlights reached only a few feet ahead before being swallowed whole. The app buzzed endlessly, flashing the same words over and over. Delivery in progress. I thought I'd lost my mind, until I saw the lights, distant at first, then closer, glowing faintly through the dark. A house, familiar yet wrong, stood alone in the void. It was Maplewood, the perfect white siding, the neat trim, the porch with its motionless wind chimes. But the house leaned sideways, sagging like a corpse, its walls peeling to reveal blackness beneath. The windows gaped wide, filled with shifting shadows. The porch light flickered, then died. My phone buzzed one last time. Final rule, do not enter, do not leave. Wait, I sat there, engine idling, breath fogging the glass. I couldn't move forward. I couldn't turn back. I could only wait, caught in the web of rules that had destroyed me. And as I waited, the world cracked. The road beneath me splintered, lines of light spider-webbing across the asphalt. The sky peeled open, revealing not stars but eyes, dozens, hundreds, staring down, unblinking. The house shuddered, splitting apart, its walls collapsing into liquid shadow that poured across the ground like a flood. I screamed, but the sound vanished instantly, swallowed by the dark. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my phone screen. Delivery complete, and then there was nothing. I don't know if I ever left that place. Some nights I'm sure I'm still there, sitting in my car before the Maplewood house as the road cracks beneath me and the sky fills with eyes. Other nights I convince myself I escaped, that I drove until the world stitched itself back together. But even then, nothing feels solid anymore. Reality is a thin sheet stretched over something hungry, and I can feel it pressing from beneath. When I try to piece together what happened after, my memories come in fragments. Waking up in my apartment with the lights still on, my phone buzzing with no signal, no notifications, just that endless faint hum. Looking in the mirror and seeing myself blink a second too late. Every detail feels untrustworthy, as though it belongs to someone else's story. The deliveries never stopped. Even when I deleted the app, even when I smashed the phone, the orders still came. They weren't on screens anymore. They were in my head, a voice whispering rules as I closed my eyes. Knock 3 times. Do not speak. Leave the bag. Wait. My body moved before I could fight it. My hands carried invisible bags down empty hallways, my knuckles rapped against walls where no doors existed. And always something took the order. Always. Something whispered back. I tried to quit. I really did. I stopped driving at night, stayed home, unplugged everything, locked my doors. But the rules seeped through the cracks. At 12:01 a.m., I'd hear footsteps outside my door. At 3:03 a.m., my window would rattle with 3 deliberate knocks. At dawn, my reflection would still be awake when I wasn't. Sometimes I wonder if I've already disappeared like the others. Maybe my name is in someone else's app right now, glowing on their screen. Maybe they're driving to my building, following impossible instructions. Maybe when they arrive, my apartment will be empty, dust on the floor, footprints ending in the dark. Other times, I wonder if I've become the customer. Maybe the rules are mine now. Maybe I'm the one who opens the door, who reaches with pale, trembling hands, who whispers in the voices of strangers. Maybe that's the truth the man in black wanted me to understand, that the cycle doesn't end, it only shifts. Drivers become customers, customers vanish into rules, and the system feeds itself forever. But the worst thought is the simplest one. Maybe I'm still delivering. Maybe I'll always be delivering. Because no matter where I am, no matter how far I try to run, I can't escape the sound. The soft vibration in the silence, the buzz that shakes me awake at night, the notification that doesn't come from any phone anymore. Delivery in progress. And I know that sooner or later, I'll hear the final chime, delivery complete. When that happens, I don't think there will be an aftermath. Not for me. Not for anyone. So if you're hearing this, if you've ever thought about picking up a late-night shift, if you've ever wondered what it's like to drive the empty streets at midnight with nothing but headlights and silence, don't download the app. Don't accept the orders. Don't follow the rules. Because once you start, you can't stop. And once you break a rule, it will know you. And once it knows you, it will never let you go.